podcast and see how that goes. And I'll just start our preview piece here and I'll start recording that. So we will see. So it says in 1 minute 30 seconds the preview will play out, and we can get started into it.
Sounds good.
And I'll just check the website here. Yeah, so actually, if anyone is listening if you can go onto my website, and there's a robertogreen.ie/live, and on that there'll be the video, and also you can just listen to the audio only. And there's a cool feature in the podcast host that I use, which would allow you to chat. So if anyone did check it out, they could ask questions. So I could encourage people to engage and ask some questions along the way if they so should wish. I think that the same sort of thing happens on YouTube as well. I don't know if you've ever done anything live on YouTube that you can do questions and
I've gone live on YouTube. I did live on Facebook, and
Okay.
yeah, that was a bit of a disaster to start with. I had the thing round the wrong way, but it was actually people watching were saying turn it around, and so that was quite helpful.
Yeah, people are generally a little bit more forgiving, I guess, when you're kind of doing it on your own and they're not paying to see it. I suppose
Yeah.
it's you can tell them to calm down if that's the case. So, all right, we have a few seconds to go. I'll give you an intro and we can start into it. Are you under any time constraints? No,
Oh,
I won't. We won't go beyond an hour. An hour is long enough for anyone to listen to me anywhere, or you, I suppose.
yeah.
Okay. Hey, folks. Welcome to an episode of 1% Better, and we're doing it live on video, live on audio, live on probably every medium I could possibly think of at this stage. And I'm delighted to introduce my guest for this one. It's Neil Seligman. Neil, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Delighted to have you along. I know we've been in touch for a while, and took a while for me to get round to getting a Tuesday night live show up and running, but thanks for your patience.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into it. Give yourself an introduction, Neil. I want to hear a little bit about you, and then we can take it from there.
So I suppose I'm probably best known as the founder of The Conscious Professional, which is a consultancy which provides mindful education. This company I formed in 2012 with the idea of bringing some of the gifts and principles of mindfulness to the corporate world. And I'd had a career previously as a barrister in the UK. And yeah, before that, my passions kind of had already come to the fore around meditation and human potential, really. And so that was kind of me as a lawyer trying to figure out how to bring some of those things to my world. And then eventually my legal career let that go. And then the new work came along. So it's kind of been a transition between the two.
Interested to hear in a bit how you try to bring some of the meditation, mindfulness into the world as a barrister. Probably challenging. But when I was reading your bio, well, I suppose first, I actually was listening to your meditations on Insight Timer. It's an app. I don't know if it's up on Insight Timer. It's a great meditation app. It's free for most of it, and I was checking those out recently. So very good. And you have a book out as well, just to call that out: 100 Mindfulness Meditations.
That's right. Yeah. I published that in 2016. It's kind of a recipe book of meditations. So you can use it to teach yourself meditation, or quite a lot of teachers use it to kind of inspire their classes and things like that.
Very good. Good to get those called out. So your journey kind of started with another book, another meditation book, I think. When you were young, a teenager, you found one, Teach Yourself Meditation. Not something I would have thought of reading when I was 16 or 17. I didn't know probably what meditation was, or might have heard of it, but never really had a good understanding. What was the initial draw to that?
I'm not sure if I can even put my finger on it. I used to really enjoy conversations with my friends at school around, how the world and the universe works. And I was fascinated by UFOs and mysteries and crop circles and all of those types of things. And with that sort of bit of the bookshop, which has those types of books, it also had some stuff around meditation and also yoga. Another one I bought quite early on. So I just kind of, in my mind, sort of lumped that all together as part of kind of what's possible, human potential, all the excitement that goes along with a sort of teenage mind and what's really going on and trying to, figure it all out. So yeah, it was just part of that, really.
And was it something you, at that time, you were talking to your friends about to get them into meditation? Was it something you kind of kept to yourself, or was it, something that you were trying to influence others on?
Yeah, no, I've always been quite vocal about what I'm doing in that sort of world of exploration, just because I find it so fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So not from a perspective of sort of enlisting or trying to get other people to do it, but just kind of sharing my passion for it, I suppose, and some of the discoveries, I suppose, that I made along the way. Um, when you find something that's kind of exciting and blows your mind, the most natural thing is to say, "Come and have a look at this. It's amazing."
Mm.
So it's more that kind of energy, I think.
Okay. And did you find once you started reading it and getting into it, I suppose beforehand, did you think you had a very busy mind? Was it overactive? Was there initial hooks to say, I can start seeing my thoughts a bit clearer now?
That's a really tricky thing for me to even recollect, because that wasn't my, it wasn't really the vibe of what meditation was about back then. We were really familiar with this idea now of we've all got these busy monkey minds, and mindfulness is like the gym that you can go to kind of
Mm-hmm.
work that through and train, and that's great. But
Mm-hmm.
back then it was not that, that wasn't the impulse for it. It was more like, sort of Star Wars, the sort of Yoda type of
Okay.
image of, there's something cool and weird about this guy, and what's all this kind of force stuff. It was, it's quite an adolescent
Right, right, right.
interest, really, rather than, oh, I'm so frantically busy, I can't possibly sit still. I wasn't that kid.
Okay, so you just wanted some sort of Jedi mind control ability to kind of lift ships in the air and things like that.
That would have been fantastic. And that's also why when I met this Reiki master in America when I was working out in a kids camp,
Right.
that it sounded to me like he was a Jedi master. So I was obviously very interested in that.
Well, the master word is probably a common theme there. So when you
Yeah,
met him, his name is Paul Ribet or Ribet, is it? Or
Rebbe, yeah.
Ribet. I got the French pronunciation right there. So, Reiki, talk to me about what was the fascination with that, and again, what pulled you in? What did you learn so much about that?
Yeah, so again, it was kind of like there's this guy from Australia who's talking about energy and using this kind of modality for healing and relaxation. And he was kind of had this aspect of kind of clairvoyance to him as well. He seemed to like know stuff, and yeah, so he was kind of like, I'd never met anyone like that before. And he was kind of maybe my age, maybe a year or two older, but he's kind of a peer
Hmm.
who was already, quite conversant with all this stuff. So I was very much attracted to that as something that I wanted to learn more about, figure out. The whole thing for me was, I was reading all this stuff about spirituality and the esoteric and mysteries, but I'd already kind of made or come to the conclusion, I guess, that I wanted to learn through my own experiences of stuff
Hmm.
rather than sort of taking on board a theory or a story or someone else's experience. I wanted to do it myself and allow that to be kind of primary.
Hmm.
So Reiki was really experiential for me. So he gave me a first Reiki session. I had all these kind of visions and stuff, and it felt like my body was levitating. It wasn't, and I was seeing all these kind of things, and feeling all this stuff, and I was like, "Wow, there's something going on here. This is amazing."
Wow, I've actually never had a session or treatment of Reiki. I know somebody mentioned to me not so long ago that it can do good for people with type 1 diabetes, like I mentioned offline that I have. I've never dabbled with it. Is dabbling the right word with Reiki, or is it, is it kind of more...
I think any of those kind of alternative things, there is an element of dabbling, isn't there? Because it's not just about the modality, it's about the person that's operating with the modality. So you could find people who are doing Reiki and have, really amazing experiences, and you could have someone who's doing Reiki and you didn't get much out of it. So it's like finding that kind of combo of someone who really knows their stuff and is really good at it. And they're kind of harder to find in my experience.
Okay. So as you started to learn and develop your skills in that way, how quickly was it before you were able to start practicing it with others and kind of becoming a teacher yourself?
Yeah, so I think it was, so I did the first degree that first year that I met this Reiki master, and then I went back the following year, and another guy that had trained with us gave me the master degree, which sort of trained with him.
Right.
But then he wasn't as good as the original one. So I then went out to where the original one was now working, which was in Kiribati, which is that island nation in the Pacific.
Okay.
So I went and spent the summer out there and trained with him for a few months to get the master degree again, and also to train in this other version of Reiki. So it's like Usui Reiki is the primary one that I trained in, and then Karuna Reiki as well. So within a couple of years, maybe 3 years, I'd got to the master level. Sounds a bit like superior. It just means that you've got the ability to now teach other people and to do the attunements of Reiki, which is part of the process how we teach. And then I started offering healings.
Okay. And consciousness then, how does that tie into what Reiki is all about? Do you start stepping back, looking at your own consciousness, becoming more aware of it as part of the process?
I don't think I realized at the time, but yeah, I think so, because I had kind of thought that the world ran on this sort of energy system, without really knowing any specifics or being able to talk much more about it than that. But then with Reiki, you get to kind of experience and feel that energy kind of moving through your body, and offering it to others. And with Reiki, you're kind of connecting in with a universal source energy. So in some traditions, that's chi or prana, different ways of kind of describing the same thing. And yeah, so kind of that was teaching me all about navigating this internal world of consciousness, which really is a practice of mindfulness and embodiment with an intention of it, to be of benefit and of service to the person that you're with. So it was very much a sort of awakening experience to me. It's like another dimension of life. And yeah, it was a big deal for me because it gave me a lot of tools that have then become quite foundational to everything else that I do. So you can imagine when I'm working in a corporate setting, I'm not talking about this stuff, but I'm talking about mindset and thoughts and emotions and self-talk and belief and all of those types of things. And I'm talking about embodiment these days because we can talk about that now in practice, because mindfulness and yoga are embodiment practices. And so it is about kind of this idea of bringing awareness into the full human vehicle, bringing all of our resources online and just being able to show up more in our world.
With Reiki and I suppose the practices, talking about sensing energy in yourself and walking into a room and detecting that with others, once you've learned that to a high level, is it something that you just have always? Is it something you can always kind of connect and tap into, or do you kind of have to keep like maintaining that level of awareness or connectivity. I don't know what the right term is.
It's a good question. I don't know. I can only answer that sort of in my experience.
Yeah.
In my experience, that has become just a sort of part of the background awareness that's there. Um, I wouldn't say that I direct a lot of my focus to that in all things that I'm doing, but I know that I can kind of turn the flashlight of my awareness into that direction, and that kind of information comes into focus. So it's kind of there, but it's not there in a sort of intrusive way.
Yeah. You always kind of, like you notice, I suppose that why I asked it, I'm trying to compare it to just practicing daily meditation or mindfulness for me. And even on the days maybe that I don't do it, some days that I don't do it, I would kind of notice that I mightn't have done it during the day. I might feel myself a little bit more stressed or not connected in as much. So it's just kind of trying to parallel to that. That was my kind of purpose behind it, trying to understand it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't practice Reiki very frequently, actually. It's very occasionally that I work with someone in a sort of healing setting like that. Sometimes if I'm doing one-to-one coaching work with someone, I'll say, oh, we're just going to do a bit of table work and I'll do a bit of Reiki on them. But even then, the Reiki tools are being used, but as a modality, the way in which I do those types of healings has evolved away from that sort of foundation by quite a wide margin.
Right.
To the point where I'm really just listening at the deepest level I know, and then responding with sound, movement, and touch, sometimes a hands-on or hands-off. So it's really just kind of being with what's there and kind of what needs to be done.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
Intuitive sort of process.
Absolutely, and intuition is something I definitely must take a note. I want to ask you about that. So as you were building all this world, I suppose, in your own world, this kind of side of you, the other part of you, the day job part, or the getting on in society, was in the world of law. You were becoming a barrister. How did you? This was kind of almost opposite ends of the spectrum. One area is very emotional connectivity, and the other is probably very IQ, very, structured, learned, and very different. So, was there an interest in that other area? Was it something you just felt you needed to do?
So, yeah, I mean, sort of slightly randomly got there, I suppose, like most of us, on the way through our career or life journey, or whatever. I really liked stationery when I was a kid.
Pens and paper and stuff like that.
Like I collected that stuff. And
binders where you could put a lot of documents into a big folder. Yeah,
total bind nerd, and post-its and all of that stuff. Love it. So I don't know, I sort of associated this good stationery with lawyers, and also the other thing that I got into also quite randomly was public speaking when I was in school.
Okay.
And a mate of mine volunteered me for some debate he was in at the last minute because his friend dropped out, and I did it, and I apparently did quite well. And then I got to go on this international trip to do like competition a couple of weeks later, kicking someone else off the team.
Wow.
So I sort of launched into that and did quite well with public speaking. And then I was thinking stationery, public speaking, sort of all going in the barrister direction. And yeah, obviously the challenge of the law is quite fun, like trying to solve people's problems and help them out was kind of part of it as well. And then I quite like the idea of also, as a barrister in the UK, you're independent, so you're working for yourself.
Right.
So that's quite appealing. So you could kind of make your own practice, and you're a little bit more in charge of your holidays and time and all the
Mm.
rest of it than if you were employed as a solicitor, let's say, which would be the other legal alternative over here.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
So you were developing that, and it was obviously paying the bills, but there was a point at which you were kind of juggling both. And maybe talk to me when it got to the point where you decided you had to maybe go one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, it was about 8 years in, and I tried doing sort of 4 days as a barrister, one day as a healer, meditation teacher, um, and the clerks, the kind of people that run the chambers,
You
were
were
actually
actually,
very.
the one day you were trying to do, was that within the chambers as well, or were you doing it completely
No,
separate?
I would do that from home.
Right, right. But
Yeah,
but your clients would have been just normal random clients, not kind of
yeah,
related. Okay, yeah. Okay.
yeah. So I was trying to do that, but it didn't really work. Like it's difficult to, as a barrister, like have a case for more than one day or whatever,
Mm.
or something urgent comes in. So it was tricky. Um, and then there was just one day. Well, I'd always said that being a barrister was my plan B, and that plan A would come along.
Right.
Um, and that's not quite what happened. I got the insight that plan B, so the first one, was over, and I didn't know yet what plan A was going to be. So I was having this kind of just saunter through the car park after work one day, and a mate of mine from bar school saw me from across the car park and bounded up. It's like, oh, hey, Neil, how's it going? I hear you're one of the rising stars of the Civil Bar. And when he said that to me, I was a little bit like, oh, that's a nice thing to say. But what actually happened in my head was I had this insight that I had to leave. That was the moment. I was like, God, I've got to get out. Um, and the insight was your star is rising in the wrong field.
Mm-hmm.
It was super clear.
Mm.
And it just literally landed like, the proverbial penny dropping.
Mm-hmm.
You're in the wrong field. And I reorganized my whole life around that moment, um, to the extent that within 5 months I left chambers, wrapped up all of my cases and my practice. I told them I was going on a sabbatical because obviously I didn't have anything to go to, so I
Mm-hmm.
just wanted to check that this was going to be a good idea. And then within about 5 months after leaving, I wrote my resignation because even though I didn't know what I was going to do, I knew I wasn't meant to go back.
Mm.
Um, so then that was kind of the big shift. But like I said, Plan A had not come along yet. I didn't know what I was meant to do.
But
Uh,
yeah, but was Plan A obviously where you are now? You know what you're doing, and what, I would hope that's probably what you're meant to be doing. But at the time when you were making that shift, and you had the Reiki skills, and you had those tools, was it not that you were kind of going in that direction, or was it just a complete? Was that not obvious? Do you think?
so yeah, I mean it was never going to be just that. Like
Mm.
the Reiki stuff was really, um, it's part of who I've become. It's kind of foundational to what I do, but it's no longer primary. And realistically, it was never going to commercially, um, be a replacement for my legal job or income. Not that it had to be in terms of amount, but even taking a big dip, um, it it's a very different model. And so it was really about finding, well, what is kind of within this dual dual interest I have. It took me a while to figure this out and express it, but I had this kind of interest in professional excellence, was something that I enjoyed and got a lot out of, but also in this other side of kind of human potential. And And when I was looking at the people at the bar, I was thinking, well, there's loads of people here who could do this just as well as me. Uh, and loads of people would love to get into that profession and do this. Whereas I think there's not that many people who are, a barrister and a Reiki master and really interested in all this stuff. And so maybe there's like a, bringing together of those two things that would make more sense for me to do. Like maybe that would be a more valuable, well, one, or enjoyable way for me to spend my time, and two, valuable contribution generally. So that was kind of the journey that I went on.
So things started to form. When that happened, around that time, the corporate world probably wasn't very open to meditation and mindfulness and people coming in talking about that. It was, even just thinking back 5 or 6 years, it wasn't in the conversation. How difficult did you find that those, I suppose, early years to try and make inroads, make an impact?
So this is 2008 when I had the insight, and 2009 when I left. And I also had not formulated anything to do with what I'm doing now yet. So I wasn't having those conversations. The first time I started having those conversations was about 2011, when I actually had an idea for a slightly different business, which was going to be kind of personal development videos for professionals for their CPD, continuing professional development kind of points. And so I had a few contacts within the law and law firms, and talked to them about it, and they all thought I was mad.
Right. So was it a non-runner at that stage?
So that was it didn't really put me off. Not quite sure why. But then this sort of second evolution of the idea came along in 2012 in a meditation. Got the kind of idea of the conscious professional, and it felt like I was being really clearly indicated that I was going to be teaching mindfulness, which even in 2012 was not yet a thing, put it that way. So that was a bit of a, oh, really? But it was also very clear. So it was like, okay, let's give that a go.
Very clear, and it's interesting, as you said, it came to you in a meditation session. I think sometimes the best ideas do come when you're dropping down a little bit. When it became the right thing to do, how did you plan going forward? What now that you're looking back, what were the kind of first steps you took? Was there a key moment where things started to take shape?
So the first thing I tried was a disaster. And that was a drop-in mindfulness class at the Law Society called Mindful Mondays. And I did a series of 10 over, I think it was one autumn or something. And the room was hideously expensive, like one of these really old, Law Society rooms. I was charging about £10 to enter. And I got between about, I think the best day was about 12 people came, and it was also a valuable session, but on the worst day, nobody came.
Did it gradually go down in numbers over the course of the 10 weeks, or?
No, it was quite random.
Okay. Right.
So I was like, this is maybe not exactly the model of what I should be doing. But what was really valuable about that was that, one, I was teaching meditation, and to the type of audience that I would like to reach. So getting some feedback about that, and just getting a sense of teaching kind of formal classes, which I'd really only done in a one-to-one setting before, and a few other kind of random events. Just kind of figuring out the language really, for guiding to that particular sort of mindset. So it was from there that I then decided, okay, this needs to be something that's purchased by a corporate, so that I'm not renting buildings and trying to advertise to the public, and it's a very difficult thing to do.
Mm.
It's just a different business model, I guess.
Sure.
And yeah, so I went that way, and that's kind of.
That's cool, though. I guess what I'm taking from that one, and the previous effort, was that you deal well with mistakes or failure, quote unquote. Was that had you an approach to that? Did your own meditation, your awareness, stand you in good stead for that, rather than to be reacting and say, God, this isn't for me, I want to go back to the barrister job?
Yeah, no, I've always been quite. I think failures, obviously you feel it a bit when you're the one sitting in the room and no one came through the door. You're like, oh well, this I'm really pushing in the wrong direction here. But when I reflect on these things, I do have quite a strong sense of the direction to go in, and when I don't, I wait until I do. And I probably should have mentioned that one of the really significant things that happened to me at a fortuitous time, so just before I left my job as a barrister, was I met my meditation teacher, who I've now been working with or studying with really for about 11, 12 years or so. And she's been so instrumental in just kind of making it safe, really, for me to go through this process and giving a context to it, and helping me process all of the kind of the creative aspect of bringing on a business in this quite different way. It wasn't like here's our 5-year plan for income. It was very much, I'm really just going into my listening and seeing what's there, and then feeding that as an idea and nurturing it, and then watching it emerge into the world. So I had a lot of trust in that process, like just on a felt sense in my body. I've always been very trustful, actually, of my inner guidance. And yeah, so I kind of had a sense that the unfolding was going in its own way in the right direction.
Your meditation coach, I suppose, is the right term. You've been 12 years with that person. How important is it to build a relationship with one person, or do you find others that you work with to kind of give you other perspectives?
So the value to me of that one-to-one relationship has been really huge. So I definitely see a huge amount of value in that. And I love to, read about meditation. I like to listen to different teachers through Audible and Insight Timer and things like that. I like to visit in-person trainings and sit with teachers and all of that. So yeah, it's not just one and that's it, but it's very useful for me to have a consistent person to bring my questions to, and to provide that kind of someone that can hold the context of this part of my story is great.
Very, very cool. So looking at your, I suppose, experience, your clients over the last few years, huge corporates, Netflix, Accenture, Warner Brothers, as you go into those and do you mainly work with leadership teams in there, or what's the typical client base you would work with?
I don't think there is really a typical. So sometimes it's a real mix of everyone in the room. Sometimes it's a specific, for some companies I do a trainee program, as their sort of onboarding. And for some it is with the leadership, or I quite often get called in to work with legal teams, for example, because lawyers like to be trained by lawyers. So
Right.
That's quite a good way in for me as an ex-lawyer. So it can be a real mix, really.
Do you find, do you still get surprised when you go in? And I guess there's the thing when I do coaching, you get so comfortable or familiar with some of the tools that you forget that other people don't know these tools, almost, that they've never been exposed to some of these things that you think are simple and things you use every day, but just because you've been doing it for years, other people haven't. Does that surprise you still when you go in?
It does sometimes, yeah, but in a nice way.
Mm.
And that also kind of reawakens my kind of um, interest and joy in sharing it as well.
Mm.
You know, a bit like when you go to a city you've been to a load of times with a friend who's never been, it kind of lights up again in a different way.
Mm. Do you ever get afraid or dealing with your fears of how things are going to be perceived or received when you go into a client, into a group, that say you're trying new material or new stuff out? How do you deal with that element of the unknown?
Um, yeah, so I mean, I think it's part of my experience that when I'm doing a new kind of bit of training or a new module or whatever, there's some nerves around it and whether it's going to work. And it's nice in a way to deliver content that because there's just a comfort with it and you kind of know how to flow with it. And so it's new for the first time. Um, but yeah, I think my 8 years in the courts of England and Wales stand me in quite good stead when it comes to being badgered by well, we judges back then, but hecklers and all that sort of stuff.
Mm.
Um, that was part of my mindfulness training, which wouldn't really call it that,
Sure.
but actually standing up in front of um, some bloke in a wig and a gown or lady in a wig and a gown and being shouted at um, is a good training in dealing with your stress reactivity and remaining calm in the face of conflict and adversity. So yeah, I think there was a lot of active mindfulness training going on there,
Mm.
even though I didn't know it.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? How it all comes around to benefit you. I often talk about the hidden benefits or unexpected benefits of doing anything. When you set out a goal to start a podcast that I talked about last year, the 10 things that I learned along the way of actually doing it were more valuable than actually probably doing it in some ways. So
Yeah.
it's all about just doing it, I guess, is the key message there. Are there simple tools that you share with clients to get them started with meditation? Or there's the busyness and they want instant gratification or things to work rapidly. What do you do to kind of help folks that are always urgently wanting more?
Yeah, so I mean, there's all sorts of little tips and tools that we offer. Um, but at the end of the day, I think the thing I like to try and impart to people, particularly if they may be new to it, is that you kind of already are. There are aspects of your life where you're already mindful, and it's really about just kind of putting a bit of an anchor in that and noticing if you can come back to that in different moments of your day. I was doing some coaching with a guy, and I was asking him about this, like, when do you feel most kind of at peace and connected? And he said, oh, it was probably when I was a kid, when I would lie in the backyard and look up at the stars, and just that kind of expanse of black and the stars in the night sky. And so I said to him, that's kind of what you're looking for in your mindfulness practice when you're hanging out there, is you're trying to just kind of sit there and be in the presence of that sort of unending night sky within your own consciousness. And that's the sort of slightly more poetic one, but for some people it's like, I feel really mindful and clear when I'm running, or when I'm dancing, or whatever. And you try and create some sort of anchor, and then people start realizing, oh, actually, it's that. Like, it's not this other thing.
Mm.
It's that thing that's already part of my experience. And so when I'm trying to navigate there, that's where I'm headed.
Mm.
I think that's quite big for people because, the thing with mindfulness, and sometimes the way I describe it, is kind of gives you the map of your internal world. One of the big things I talk about with people is, we're so amazing at navigating our external reality because we get socialized in how to do it. And, you work with your apps on your phone and you get to the meeting and you say the right things and you write your emails. And, we know how to do this because we get trained from, when we can hold a screen to start doing it. But we haven't, for most of us in, the generations that I'm talking to, had this internal training of how do I navigate my thoughts, my emotions, my mindset, my beliefs, this kind of inner world of sensations that's kind of weird and peculiar and I generally leave alone. And how can I go looking there when everything's so busy? And what am I looking for? And it's really frustrating. There's all of that there for people. So really just, trying to find one anchor that's already there in their life can be a good way of kind of making it real and accessible.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting perspective of, because as you said, everybody has that one or two things that they look back on when they were in a good place or a happy place, and it's probably all around them as well, that they just need to connect into it. It makes a lot of sense. What part of I suppose the work you're doing at the moment do you get the most enjoyment from, that kind of lights you up, that excites you the most?
I have to say I really enjoy all of the things that I get to do now. It's real delight to be doing what I'm doing at the moment. I'm just finishing my next book, and I'm really loving that experience. I didn't realize how much I'd missed writing until I started this book. So I'm having that feeling now at the end of the book where I'm like starting to be like, oh no, it's going to be gone soon. Like it's like a buddy that you hang out with.
Yeah.
And you're always thinking about it and think, oh, what about this? And kind of collecting things to put in it and tending to it. So, the writing, teaching, my artwork is probably the deepest aspect of my work. And there's something very precious to me about the experience of creating a soul experience for someone. I mean, the output of the things that I do are quite different, but to me they all feel like the same thing. So it's really all about being present and mindful and witnessing, and then I'm either saying stuff or writing stuff or having a conversation or whatever.
The artwork, just maybe touch on that a little bit. I didn't see much, or I saw you are an artist and you've created art. How do you go about that? What's the process you do for that? And do you have specific themes to focus on?
Yeah, so it's I create portraits of people. I call them soul portraits, and it's a photographic experience. So generally, someone will come to. I usually shoot in a dance studio or just a open space, basically, and the experience starts with kind of would look more like a Reiki session than a photographic shoot.
Okay.
And then I sort of lead the person into just a kind of playful, expressive state. And it sounds kind of bonkers, but I get them to answer questions with colored fabrics with their eyes closed. And then as they're moving around with the colored fabrics answering these questions, I take photographs of them. And then these little gifts appear in the camera. So what I'm actually doing as this is occurring, so it's kind of the idea of witnessing, sculpting sacred space, and creating from source. Those are the three themes of my work. It's a really fun, playful, different way of creating a portrait of someone. It's almost like the images are vibrational rather than representative. They're still representative, but not in a literal way.
Very interesting. I think
it's really difficult to describe.
Need to be physically there to see it, I think. Yeah, but
there's a video on my website, on the Soul Portrait Studio website. It's like 5 minutes, but it shows a portrait being done, so you get a sense of it.
Okay, very cool. we've talked a lot about how you help others meditate and become present. How do you actually do it? What's your kind of practice like, and how often do you do it? What's that structure like?
Yeah, so my formal practice is a weekday practice. So Monday to Friday, my morning practice starts with I make a cup of tea and I sit on my meditation cushion and I drink my tea and look out the window. That's stage one. I then do some mindful movement, and that's kind of on a yoga mat behind. And then I come back to the cushion, and then I go into a closed eyes sit. And it will depend if I have a particular focus. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Um, and yeah, I don't listen to anything, or I just kind of sit and explore what's there. And sometimes it remains quite surface level, and sometimes I drop into a slightly deeper straight and follow that through. Sometimes I have to have a timer on if I'm on a schedule that day, and sometimes I don't. So I just kind of flow with the day.
Mm.
And then I have a set of commitments and intentions that I kind of just go through these sentences, and they're kind of just starters of the sentence, and then I can complete it. So it's something that I'm tending for the day, something I'm committed to, something I'm grateful for, those kind of things. Just kind of start the day with intention. So there's those kind of layers to my practice in the morning.
Okay. And you said typically when you're not on a schedule, how long would that tend to take? Half hour, 40 minutes, more?
The whole thing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I would say at least it's probably half an hour to an hour.
Mm.
Yeah, depending on the day.
Interesting, yeah. Do you get up mad early? Are you one of those really crazy early risers? No,
No,
you don't do that.
no.
No, I like, yeah, it's
I
interesting.
mean, if I have to, I will, but generally, I'm not a friend of the early hours so
Okay,
much.
you're on the other side. Do you find doing that when that practice happens for the rest of the day? Do you know you've done it? Do you feel that the day goes in a different direction than the days that it mightn't go?
The thing that I really notice is if I skip my practice and I got to go and teach that day, is that it feels a bit different. So, when you're training and you know your stuff, whatever, and it kind of feels like you're plugged into something and there's like a flow. You get up, you start going, and then it's kind of happening.
Mm-hmm.
But I very occasionally have the experience where I'm like, oh, this isn't plugged in. Like the flow isn't happening. What's going on? I'm talking nonsense. And it's usually the days that I haven't practiced.
Right.
So, like, it is noticeable.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I concur. I guess even just I would try to do at the moment maybe a 15-minute stretch every morning while I'm kind of listening to a meditation and kind of calling it honouring myself. But the days that I definitely don't do it, I notice it, and it feels, as soon as the hardest part of it is starting, like any jog, like anything. It just not the actual doing of it, it's the moving into doing it. And as soon as I hit the mat and I'm 1 minute in, I know, oh God, I'm so glad I'm doing this right now. It's just it's massive in that respect. I like to ask folks about the inner voice and the dialogue and the monologue or the chatter that goes on. How do you deal with that? How do you manage to keep that on the down low? Have you approaches or techniques to just block it out or be one with it?
Yeah. Blocking it out doesn't work. So that's resistance.
Right.
So that sort of enters into energizing that voice generally. And being one with it is inadvisable as well. If your inner voice is anything like mine, comes up with all manner of nonsense.
Yeah.
So being one with that, I think, is one of them.
I probably wouldn't be here now if I was one with my inner voice. I think I'd probably be a long time gone at this stage. So yeah.
Yeah, I was in a session with Jack Cornfield in March, and just one of the really simple sentences that he said was, um, "I hope you don't think you're your thoughts." But he said it with such like open-hearted compassion,
Mm,
um, for the suffering that goes along with believing that you are your thoughts.
mm-hmm,
And so mindfulness for me has taught me that, this internal world of chatter and content stream is just, one of multiple,
mm-hmm,
which all sit within the deeper aspect of awareness.
mm-hmm.
So that space that all of the traditions point really, this sort of limitless, unending, eternal space of awareness, um, is really the space that I go to find me. So I need to figure out, oh, is this thought something to act on?
Mm-hmm.
You, I would check it within awareness rather than go along with it.
Mm.
So really, for me, it's kind of been kind of a journey of not taking the thought stream seriously, laughing at it occasionally,
Yeah,
um, not worrying when it's judgmental or crazy or bitchy or whatever.
yeah,
It's mad what goes on in there.
yeah. It's interesting. Um I suppose for most of my adult life, if I had a hangover after a heavy night out or a heavy weekend, the stream of thoughts coming in would have always been negative, and it would have made me feel worse, and the whole cycle of the thoughts and emotions connecting in and just making you bad. But I haven't had I gave up drink 18, well, what is it, 15 months ago, 16 months ago now. And what's cool is that obviously giving it up was great, but the crazy thoughts still kind of come in. And before I would have attributed it to withdrawal from booze or whatever, but now I just say, well, actually they're still there, but I don't act on it, or I don't allow them to annoy me. It's just that constant stream of information that's going in and around. So it's good that they're still there, and bad, if you know what I mean. But it's just,
Yeah.
creating the awareness, I suppose.
And then the other aspect of it is, if there are thoughts which feel, um, repetitive, or, like you're feeling a bit victimized by the internal world, which is quite normal, is just to think to yourself, like, is there another thought which is true or truer? On the same subject matter, which is another thought which is true or truer. And if you can seat yourself in awareness whilst you ask yourself that question, then you can start kind of leveling the playing field between the sort of negative inner critic, or that sort of judgmental voice we've all got, and then the sort of voice of the inner sage, I call it in my book. This kind of wisdom that can arise, but um, you get to choose in every moment which voice you kind of give energy to, and certainly which you believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. You mentioned Jack Cornfield as one of the teachers, I suppose. Is there others that, outside of folks listening, go and checking your stuff out, but you get influenced by, you like listening to, or find deep and
I
insightful?
really like, I do like Eckhart Tolle's stuff. And my tip for him is to listen to his retreats on Audible. So he's got these recordings from weekend retreats or whatever. And it's pretty much like being on the retreat. So, I'll be listening to it on the tube in London, but getting the experience of kind of being in his presence. And because meditation is traditionally an oral tradition, listening to someone's voice, I think particularly the master teachers like Eckhart Tolle, is really good, because you're getting that kind of transmission element of the practice as well. So I really like that. Um, I like Byron Katie. She's not necessarily a sort of meditation teacher, but I like her vibe, and the work that she does, I think, is very powerful. Um, and Alan Watts has been quite pivotal for me over the years. He's got lots of little booklets which are very rich in learning, and yeah, has kind of really helped me deepen my meditation practice. Yeah, they're probably my favourites, I would say.
Cool. Very good. And conscious of time, we'll wrap it up in a few minutes. You mentioned you have another book coming out. Is there a title on that one yet? Is it due?
Yeah. So that one's called Conscious Leadership,
Okay.
and it's with White Lion Publishing, and it's a build and become book. So it's within a series of their books. But it's the idea that for conscious leadership, it's not just for leaders or corporate people, but that leadership is something that we all can embody, and it's really about doing the self work. Leadership development is really the same as human development, in this kind of thesis of the book. So it's kind of a process that we can go through. It's quite active, and lots of kind of little practices to do, and stuff. So yeah, it's a fun one to write.
Very, very interesting. Is there any one tool or tip out of the book that you could share that somebody could take on board easily from listening to a podcast?
So what I've been writing about today, been writing about creativity. So one of the tips I was talking about today is the idea of creating too much. So we tend to, when we create stuff, whether it's trying to problem solve or whatever, try and we do it and put energy into doing it until we've got a good enough solution. But there's this website called Upworthy that you might have heard of that spreads kind of good news stories. And for every story they put out, they make the writer write 25 different headlines for it. And so it's that idea of you keep going, even if you've got a good enough solution, keep creating. There's a sort of abundance to the energy of creation. An apple tree doesn't produce 5 apples. It'll produce so many apples until it breaks its own branches.
Right.
So yeah, create too much.
Very good. It'll give people a bit of a taste. And when is it due out?
It's in October. I can't remember exactly the date, but it is actually on Amazon already, which is a bit intimidating for me. So you can pre-order it, but it's not quite finished yet. But it should be out there by October. That's
one good way of putting you under a deadline when people can actually buy it beforehand. Hopefully, you have plenty of time to get there.
Always there.
Very good. And so Neil, it was great chatting to you, and I think we've touched on a lot of interesting topics for me, and hopefully for folks that check it out, listen to the podcast, or if they're actually listening or watching at the moment. How can folks find out more about you? Go to your website, go to some of your maybe upcoming workshops or retreats even?
Yeah, thanks. So the main website for the business side of things is theconsciousprofessional.com. So that's kind of the corporate side. The sort of public access side for events and retreats and Instagram and all those types of things is neilseligman.com. I'm neil.seligman on Instagram and just Neil Seligman on YouTube. And I do a new video practice each week. So if you want to come along and have a go, they're all there on YouTube, or you'll find them on IGTV. And then I've got a couple of things coming up. So on May 24th, The Conscious Leader is a one-day event in Sheffield, which is going to be great. And then I've got a mindfulness retreat from the 28th to the 30th of June at Champneys, which you can book through the Champneys website. And the same venue, 4th to the 6th of October, I do a Soul Ignition retreat, which is kind of a deeper dive using mindfulness and life coaching and stuff into just kind of kick-starting wherever you are in your life.
Wow. Very good. Must be a lot of work goes into putting those together, Neil. Like, what sort of preparation goes into that?
Yeah, I mean, the mindfulness one I've been teaching for, I think, three or 4 years now. So that sort of runs itself now. It's got a good shape to it. Soul Ignition I started last year and was amazing. It was a really brilliant event. So that's kind of got a shape to it as well. And I think just over the years, you kind of work out what works and doesn't work, and then just package it in a way that you can flow with it through. A retreat is great because you've got more time with people.
Yeah,
lot kind of informal conversations can happen, and so we can adapt the program really as it goes along based on who's there. So yeah, it's a nice way of doing it.
Very cool. Yeah, sounds great. I interviewed a couple of comedians a few weeks ago, and they talk about putting bits together. It's similar in a way, putting a show together as putting anything together. There's a huge amount of effort goes into doing that in the background that nobody maybe realizes, I suppose, until you go into it and it runs smoothly, and even then they don't realize it. But yeah, I hear you. I know the effort that's required. So brilliant. Look, thanks for your time, Neil. It was great to chat. I enjoyed listening to your story, and I've certainly taken a few bits and pieces out of it, and hopefully those that do check it out also have enjoyed it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rob. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, likewise. I will leave it there, and we'll talk to you hopefully again in the future, Neil. If you're ever over in these parts, let me know.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
All right. Good night, man.
Night.
Good luck. Okay, let me just stop. All right. So that's the podcast with Neil now done, and I hope it went quite well. I know, folks, if you're listening to this on the podcast audio only, the recording has just about finished. I'm just going to give a call out to the upcoming podcast 1% Better on Friday. It is with Susan Bennett, who is better known as the original voice of Siri, the app on the voice app on your iPhone. I interviewed Susan a few weeks back, and we talk about her career as a voiceover actor and actress and a musician, but the whole area of Siri and how that all came about was fascinating. And she talks about her decision to come out as Siri after a period of time, wondering what will happen if she did, and the good things that came after that. So look, I'll leave it there. This podcast hopefully was worth checking out. Thanks as always. Go to the website, go to Instagram, Rob of the Green, and any of the other socials, and it'd be great to have you following and sharing. Thanks so much. Good luck.